So a lot of scientists do social media just because other scientists are doing it. I'm talking to Scott Nelson from TPR Media today, and he's a media and production expert. And we talk about the who, what, when, where, and how of doing social media. So do you want to just take us through your who, what, when, where, how?
Absolutely. Mate, delighted to be on here. I've been really enjoying your YouTube episodes.
Oh, thanks.
And it's actually been really fun to watching them rolling out. Now, the thing
My key advisor here from YouTube.
I'm doing my best. I'm going to try and kicking him along. My question to you is always, okay, come back to your fundamentals. Who are you making this for? What is the purpose? Why would somebody be interested in this? Is it an immediate thing? And, then how are we actually going to put it in front of them?
So let's say it's a new scientist who is starting out their career.
Yeah.
They just want to reach other scientists initially and better communicate their research.
Absolutely. My first comment, again, if I go back to first principles, what are the places that you could reach the most number of people for the least amount of money and effort? And those are obviously your social media platforms. And my advice around that is to use all of them. And this is something that I'm talking to you about, as I've asked you which platforms you post on, and Twitter being your main one. But my comment being you need to have an active LinkedIn, you need to have an active Facebook, you need to have an active Instagram. If you're not using all of these available resources that are relevant to your audience, something we talked about before is it's probably not as relevant depending on which stream of the scientific community that you're in. Snapchat's probably not going to reach your audience. If you were looking for a 13 to 22-year-old audience, then that'd be a good one. Whereas as we've talked about, Facebook as a platform is very mature now, it's aged up. There are people on there more actively from, a 20 to 65 age group. So, if you have people you'd like to be communicating with.
If that's professionals, it's going to be older people, right?
Absolutely.
Career,
Absolutely. So, again, you sort of look at that 30, 35 plus for, a more senior professional. They're on there. And, they're worth tracking down on there.
Oh, so when you see me move my vlogs onto Facebook finally, when I finally get around to it, you'll know it's thanks to Scott.
I'll be very impressed. And
a bit of experimenting there to find the right platform.
Mate, there's a lot of experimenting.
Don't just take it as given because everyone's on Twitter that's the only way. You should.
Correct. And
reach out to people.
the other problem that you'll find is, one platform might be very successful for you for a year or two, but then they will change the way that they deliver content, they will change their ad platform, they will change their algorithm, and all of a sudden something that's been performing very well for you will cease to perform. I found LinkedIn to be extremely useful for a series of writing that I was doing, and I was getting enormous traction, some of them 200,000, 500,000, pretty big numbers. And overnight, it went from, being able to get potentially 500,000 readers to 10, because they changed the way their ad platform was working, they changed the way content was, and it just died. And that's why you have to have more than one, because if you only have a singular prong, that is your weakness.
That's great. Now let's talk about the who, what. So what's the what?
Well, what is it that you're doing? And how can you make that interesting? Because it might be interesting to you and it might be interesting to a very small specific group of people, and that's fine. But if you are hoping to find a larger audience, you've got to try and pull out entertaining parts of that story. And, if you look at news media and the capacity to, make people stop scrolling as you're flicking through your news feed, you have to look for entertaining bites.
So it's not just going to be, here's my new research. You need something.
Absolutely not.
Maybe more personal or...
Because that links into the, why is this relevant? How does that affect me? How does that research that you're doing affect my life and make it better or worse? And you, as a scientist, if you are looking at a comm strategy, you need to spend some time thinking about that.
I was saying I've really noticed in our discussions as you have this focus on the other person. It's not about what you want to say, but it's thinking about what your audience wants to listen to or look at and read.
It's very true, because your problem, and this is not just you, This is every company, every business, every product. You need to start from a position that nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
What it is that you're doing, no one cares.
I think that goes for research too.
Absolutely
Research is very
everything.
niche. Yeah.
Absolutely everything. Nobody cares. But it's even down to products and things that you're super passionate about, super excited about. Hobbies, whatever it is. No one cares. And what you need to do is you need to find a way to engage other people. There is an audience out there for everything, but you need to put the effort into making that visible, exciting, and then even more important than visible and exciting, the hardest part of any communication strategy is it's easy to be good for an hour, a day, a week, a month, but can you be consistent for a year, 5 years, or 10 years? Because the magic happens when you just do simple things. None of this has to be, you don't have to be making the best ad anybody's ever seen. You don't have to be writing the best work anyone's ever seen. What ends up trumping everything is your consistency.
So consistent communication about your research.
Consistency over time,
and trying
absolutely.
Things.
Yep, and continuing to try, much in the same way as that you experiment in your research.
And that's because you then build up a critical mass of an audience who are
Correct.
interested in what you're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this is, one of the comments I often make is about, this idea of uplift, where you are getting a broader audience and, you're not reliant on one pillar. You always talk about in construction or finance or any strategy of having multiple pillars, because that's where you build a base of strength. And again, if you're balancing everything on Twitter and nothing else is holding it up, it is open and prone to risk. Whereas, if you have that multi-channel approach, even down to, as we were talking about, good old email, text message, word of mouth, putting it in front of people. Each strategy has a time and a place.
That's great. And I think we've sort of covered the how in that, haven't we?
I think so. The how really comes down to how much money you've got to spend. I'll be honest with you. And that's, the same conversation I'd have with a client. They go, I have this problem, I have this research, I want to get it out in front of people. With money, you can do it faster and easier. With no money, you've got to do it hard, because you have to make the content, write the content, distribute the content. Whereas if you've got funding, you can produce something and put it in front of people on other people's platforms that have already been built.
So I think if you do it yourself, then you've got to focus on more basic content, but maybe is a bit more personable and relatable, because it's not going to be
Absolutely.
produced.
Yeah, and the other thing I would suggest is, I've talked heavily about using your different social media stuff. Never discount the importance of building your own place on the internet. So if you've got your own website for your brand, your research, whatever it is that you're doing.
Some scientists are good at that, but some just rely on the university to have the university webpage for them. So
of course, and again,
I'm a big believer in making your own webpage.
And you can see, when we talk about the pillars of stability, your research might end up traversing many universities and many countries, whereas it will come back to you, the individual. Where can we follow your journey? Because again, you look at it as a compounding investment. If you're putting all your articles, all your podcasts, all your work, all your writing onto a singular site, when people punch your name into YouTube, rather than just finding a handful of places, they can actually find a central site that links to all
Everything.
the work that you do. And that, as I've talked about, being consistent over time, that
So important.
to me would form, the backbone of that strategy.
A lot of researchers would move university several times in their careers, or they might move out to industry and come back to research.
Yes.
So you're having that web page with that consistency, I think.
Yes, that documents the entire journey. Because the thing is moving, in and out of research has its benefits as well. Because if you're moving into industry, seeing, both the applications and the complexities of that, outside of a purely academic sphere, that brings real strength and depth to you as a researcher.
Definitely,
And that's very valuable to that story that you could only tell if you control the narrative.
That's great. I have seen a lot of researchers move out to industry jobs and come back in again, and they're often really successful because they bring this new perspective. But that's probably another topic.
It certainly is. Look, that's one that I'd be excited to talk about because that's something that I've mentioned to you, that I love going back, to an academic point and talking about, the crossover, because quite often when I work with young graduates, they'll come to me and go, I didn't know anything about this. Because once you throw them into work, and you watch their heads spinning, I find a really interesting crossover between, again, understanding the fundamentals and then the complexities of actually doing the work.
Yeah, we just haven't spoken about the when. So how do you decide when to post some content?
Absolutely. The when, from a commercial perspective, is always very easy because you need to sell stuff and you need to be selling stuff all the time. And generally it's when a product's coming to market or when there's a new product or, and that sort of idea, I guess, will filter across to your research and academia, where if you have, something new, you have a new idea,
People would have a new research paper coming out.
And a new paper.
A specific date for that. Yep.
I would have to imagine that either it's, straight to press when it's done because you want to get it out as fast as possible.
You might have a week or two warning about the date it's coming out, so
Yeah.
you have a bit of time to prepare.
But I would also always look, I go back to that term of uplift again and go, where else could I get some additional help that I haven't had to build off my own back? Is there a conference that I could be presenting it at? Is there, a magazine that I could be having this released in conjunction with? Is there a bio interview piece I could do?
There's something I've done, specific magazines and newspapers that are interested in environmental stories.
Yes.
And, I get to know the journalists a bit. And if I have a piece of work coming out that I know they might be keen on, I write to them and say, hey, this is coming out in 2 weeks. What do you think? And probably a 50% success rate with then getting stories. But I only send them stuff I know they'll be interested in.
Absolutely. But that's precisely the exercise, is going, how can I try and squeeze a little bit more out of this? Rather than just my own labour, is there some other platform I can use to make it have a larger impact?
Yeah, I think it's a really great message because people put years and years into their research papers, right? It might take years to do a research paper. So if you just publish it and that's it, whereas you could spend another few more days to better communicate it, and the work just has so much more reach and it's going to reach more of the people that need that science.
Correct, and really that's the when. And you look at any major government or commercial announcement, if they'll involve a time, a place, an activity, they'll involve a couple of big names that'll help to get additional focus on that. And that strategy works across anything. You've just got to apply what is relevant to your industry.
That's really good advice for a research paper, but that event doesn't happen that often, maybe a few times a year, if you're a productive researcher. So when do you do the posts that you're doing for consistency that might be as big news that you need to do them?
Correct. And what you need to do is you need to find something that interests you that you can use to build more stories. So precisely like what you're doing, with your vlogs, you're creating opportunities for news, and you're working with people to actually create more touch points. And I think that's the hard part, because if you just sit there and go, oh God, what am I going to post about today? That's going to be an uphill battle and you will never do it. Whereas if you are talking about, things that you're going to, stuff that you're attending, and again, for the most part,
it's a rainy day and I was over at Scott's house for coffee and we
and we thought we'd record a thing, and we've made an opportunity that is useful for you and for me, and you've created something out of nothing, and that's always my favourite part of being a marketing person, is I love the idea of just creating an opportunity and turning it into something.
I think you said to me once about noticing moments, and I'm definitely been on Twitter for years, but now doing the vlogs, I start to notice moments. I'm like, this is a moment that I'm enjoying, but I can actually share this with a broader audience, or this is a great conversation I'm having with someone. I'd love to share this with more people. And you start to think, I could just put a camera there.
And you are spot on, and that's the awareness that you are in a moment that is worth sharing. And they come every day, but if you're not in tune with that, if you're not looking for that, of course you're not going to see it. It'll just float past. as
It's
another
just
minute
about
in the
building
day.
this awareness,
It is.
practice,
It's correct. And going, it doesn't need to be painful. It doesn't need to be, oh God, what am I going to post about? Because I think the other thing that you've got to remind yourself is that a lot of the work that you will do, particularly in the early weeks, months and years, look, not a lot of people are going to see it. And that can be difficult because it can be difficult to maintain momentum when you post things and you're like, one like, thanks, Mum. That can be very difficult. But the joy in that is that you can also afford to make mistakes, try different things, because again,
no one's looking.
Yeah. So, you can stuff it up, you can make mistakes. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be polished. Just do the work.
Yeah.
Like, make the thing, put the thing out there, do it again. And, if you're driven in what you do, you'll aim to make it a little bit better each time. And over that long duration, that is, the key to any success, you'll see a progressive improvement.
Great. Thanks, Scott. It's great to have a conversation.
Mate, pleasure.
So that was Scott Nelson from TPR Media, and we're just talking a bit about social media for scientists, drawing on his background in marketing and communications. Do you have any socials that you wanted to share?
You can find me at scottnelson_AU and my website, tpr.media.
Thank you. This has been the Conservation Hackers vlog. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this post. Until next time.